this sort of touches on one of the things that you mentioned, Joel, but how did you get physician buy-in and support? Because a lot of this is not, I was listening to the morning session, and then a couple of the other speakers, I think it was for COVID. And one of the things that they spoke about was technology is not necessarily the issue. It's the process and the governance structures within the organization. So when you're looking at doing something like conversion to Expanse, that's going to be impacting pretty much all of your clinicians. How did you structure the different teams? And were you able to get the physicians on board?
We did. I mean, all the way up through go live, I just couldn't have been happier with the engagement we had from our physician services team and our providers. We had a very active PAC committee, a physician advisory committee. Just thumbnail measurements, I always say I look at the providers in thirds. A third will be your early adopters, a third will just go along with the early adopters in the second wave, and a third will fight you every inch of the way. And that's pretty much what we had. And in my case, the conversion is what hurt us. The product is a good product, but people just think now I get to blame MEDITECH, and they don't understand it was conversion. They don't want to take time, but we got to the point if a doctor didn't find the right parking spot, it was MEDITECH's fault. Just the world became MEDITECH's fault, but it really, a lot of it was due to the conversion. And it technically, again, it was a success. We did it. Everything Mike said about the loops we had to run over and over with MEDITECH to make sure the errors weren't there. We got all that things ironed out. They just couldn't find the stuff. So now a year later, we're still running our old EMR because they run in there to find out what a document was called, and then they try to go find it in MEDITECH. So that just can't happen. So it was a huge lesson learned for us. And I think, Mike, to your point, whether MEDITECH couldn't advise you, and we used some of the best named consultants in the industry, there wasn't advice there, so we had to learn it ourselves.
Same here.
We did, we paid the price, and I'd be very careful if I ever did it again. But providers were very engaged, and even our providers after live, they said, we didn't know what we didn't know until it was live, and then had to go find these documents. So your early adopters, your strong folks, they're doing fine now, but it's taken them over a year to get there. The ones that were struggling at go live are still struggling and still go back to the old EMR, and they make us promise we're never going to take it away. But at some point we have to sunset the old one.
And did you all have CMIOs, CNIOs, or clinical governance in place sort of ongoing, or did you start them up for this particular project?
We had it ongoing, but we had so much turnover that the people that made decisions early on weren't there when the system was going live. And that's something I've learned over and over again doing this for a number of years. The team you start with is not the team you finish with in a small hospital. And you lose one or two key people, you change the culture of the project very quickly.
And Mike and Jeanette, how about you guys?
I didn't have, I mean, we had, unfortunately, we had everybody in our ambulatory team quit pretty much at the same time. And so that, with that implosion, we started over, but we had 4 people on that team, and we had to rebuild that. But going back to what Joel was saying about the, I mean, from the PAC standpoint, we had great participation. Our providers were very motivated. They did not like the next gen platform. And so when we would have our PAC meetings, everybody was engaged. Everybody really felt, you know, as part of the team, and they were making great decisions. But they were doing everything in the abstract. And once the system was installed and they started using it, it was vastly different with the impression that they had of it. Even though we would show pictures or we would review things, their idea or their ideal of the EMR has since changed, and they don't necessarily see it now the same way. And so they nitpick the system and will blame MEDITECH at times. Well, you told us this. And like, well, no, we agreed we would put this, create a template this way, and it was voted upon in the PAC, but they remember what they want to remember. So while we had great participation, I think one of the very difficult concepts for the providers was just something so new to them in the way of a new EMR, not understanding or being able to see the workflow completely and grasping all that in the short time that you have in a meeting to get through decisions that have to be made. But the we enjoyed a good relationship with the providers. We still do. We had great governance before that on the clinical side of nursing and the rest of it. We didn't have much in the way of physicians. We didn't pay the physicians for their participation in the project. They just seemed very motivated to participate. So we were fortunate in that regard. We did not have a CMIO, but we did lean heavily on our medical directors to help set the tone, the agenda, and getting participation from the providers.